Hi everybody, welcome to the AI Builders podcast. This week I'm joined by Rick Clegg, the Head of Developer Experience at Wise. Rick and his team are responsible for building and maintaining a world-class developer experience at Wise, which impacts 900 engineers. Rick has had an illustrious career as an individual contributor, as an engineering leader since 2012, but also as a mentor. He was instrumental in building and setting up the Wise Start Academy, which oversees the training of 50 graduates every single year. I was really excited to have Rick on the podcast because he is a world leader in developer experience, and developer experience with AI is changing. And I know a lot of people out there are trying to grapple with how are developers going to be enabled with AI and what does the experience look like. In this conversation, we dive into how Wise were able to figure out their power users, how they were able to help engineers adopt AI systematically, and also what the future holds for the developer experience role. Sit back, enjoy. Talk to you soon.
One. Hey, and I don't care about what they say. Come from a place where we pray for better.
We're here. We're live. We're running. Rick, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Where do we find you today?
I'm in our London office, which is our headquarters in Worship Square in London.
Very good. And is there some kind of conference going on today you were telling me about?
No, we're running a agent-only day, like hackathon workshop with one of our squads here to try and upskill, get people using it in different ways, testing things they haven't tested before. And then I'm judging it after this, what everyone's made.
And it's just engineers or
just engineers, yeah. Okay. Yeah, just engineers. That's my focus. But things have been changing, as you can imagine, with the amount of what we call a non-engineer wanting to get their hands on these tools.
Yeah, I'm sure we're going to dive into that. And Karim, welcome as well.
Glad to be here.
Where are you?
Same thing, in London, in some nice little...
Yeah.
And around Clerkenwell, yeah. This is where we spend most of our time here, actually, whenever we come with the Kerno team. So not that far, actually, from the Wise office, maybe 20-minute bike ride.
There you go. Well, Rick, I was super excited to have you on, right? Because up until now, we've been talking to CTOs, heads of engineering, who, maybe arguably are removed from a lot of the action in the coalface, right? And I guess I was excited to have you on because your focus is developer experience at Wise, right? Arguably, it's a role that has changed pretty quickly over the last 6 to 12 months, right? So how would you describe your role as a DevX day-to-day, and how is it shifting in this agentic era?
The pace is crazy. It kind of reminds me of being a front-end engineer in the early 2010s, where you didn't know if you were using Grunt or Gulp or React, Vue, Angular, Backbone. I guess we've, as a concept of developer enablement, we've been around quite a while. It started off with the classic view of developer experience, which was like CI and CD. In the 2010s, this is before my time at Wise, we were in a much more of a kind of build over buy, I think, as we were scaling up and trying to find things and save money. We're very mission driven and focused. So we kind of tackled them. And I guess the kind of first role of developer experience then was to try and tackle testing. We were trying to do that. We use Kubernetes here. We were trying to find ways that we could enable engineering teams to be able to spin up their PRs running against almost like a fake Wise. And then once we I definitely wouldn't say mastered that, but once that kind of was burning, we then went on the discoverability route. So we adopted Backstage by Spotify as our internal developer platform. And that took us on a very interesting journey then, which was what my teams and engineers and stuff started calling compliance engineering, because what it kind of turned out as we were getting more and more heavily regulated, that if you have a catalog of all your production services, that's incredibly valuable for proving your compliance posture. So we spent a long time kind of refining and working on what was started off as a discoverability tool to help engineers navigate, at the time was around 500 services, to actually becoming a catalog to prove our estate and we knew everything about ourselves. The big shift that's happened with AI is now having to focus and upskill on local development. That wasn't really an area we focused on. We kind of always looked at kind of the human-centric side of thought to PR. CI would pick up PR to image, CD would pick up image to live, and we never really concentrate on the local tooling. Whereas now that has dragged me into domains like user technology, device management, local security, and this kind of area. And as you said, like the pace it's all moving, I'm, with my own personal accountability, trying to learn every tool on the planet and have a good gauge on where it's good, where it's bad, and is it secure for non-engineers, engineers alike.
And is there more stakeholders that you need to work with as part of that, or were you already working with a lot of stakeholders anyway?
Less stakeholders. Wise is an incredibly empowered bottom-up company. Like, we would be called a pillar team. So if I'm closest to the key metrics of productivity, then I'm best to make the decisions for the org, not without challenge. It's one of the kind of values is strong opinions, loosely held. So I expect challenges, but I'm like kind of empowered to make decisions to help drive us forward.
Nice. Karim?
No, yeah, I'm just so you just to go back maybe to the event that you're having today, right? I was wondering, is this the first time you hold that event? Okay.
First time we're doing prizes.
Okay.
Like we carry on.
Yeah. No, sorry. I was just wondering if it's like, what was the result from that event? I'm just curious. Past events, did it unlock something for the developers? Because you're giving them like kind of a safe space, and you're giving them time and saying, okay, here today you're allowed to do like anything you want. You have this, like, just go at it, right? And you're giving them that that permission, to experiment, to do that. So I was wondering, maybe, because I'm not sure a lot of companies give this type of time to their developers. They just tell them, hey, here's AI, kind of on board to it, and then, well, they don't basically dedicate like this type of time for them. So I was wondering, what were the results from that in the past kind of events that you did?
Been very different. So each one has been 2 months apart, almost to the day. And that's not planned that way. It's just the time it takes to organize, book the event space, everything else. The first one was around December 12th-ish last year. So at that one, the kind of key vibe was, you can't tell me how to do my job. You still had an incredible amount of people that had dabbled in AI back in March before it got game changing. So very skeptical. It was pre-Christmas as well. And a lot of people travel then and stuff. The people that all took part, the main vibe was, yes, I feel more confident. I will use these tools again, kind of takeaway. The second one was 2 months later. And now this was now being around February 12th, and the tone had completely shifted. So I was running, in order to help people and make it a safer place, I was running like intimate 101 sessions for the tools. All I had to do was give them a 101 session, the same thing I'd done previously 2 months ago, and the spike in adoption was incredible. You had people that were coming along and they were saying to me, these tools don't work for my service. The next week, I'd run another 101 session for, say, Windsurf or another one of our tools. And they'd be like, oh, yeah, so I was using it over the weekend and I ran out of tokens. A week later, they were on my power users list. And something had shifted, like, fundamentally. And it was almost like now I didn't need to babysit anymore. I'd shown them how to open the door and engineers were starting to run through. By the one we're running today, interesting, in Wise now, you would have had to have been living under a rock not to have touched these tools at all. I don't think it's too late to the party, but I think the goals will be how many users, for instance, would now be using multiple work trees to try one shot compared to just using Windsurf to kind of do small features and functions. I'm hoping to expand. It's being led by some of our power users. We can talk about that definition, but it's been led by our early adopters in AI. And this is the first time, and we've said as we've evolved the sessions, okay, you've got to do real work. So it's got to be on your services. It's not like greenfield, and use these tools the best you can to create new features, solve things you've always wanted to solve, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah. And I think that's amazing at a company the size of Wise. Because I think like right now, all the expectations are like, yeah, small startups, fast moving. Yes, AI left and right. They're going through that, as you say, those stages. I don't know if you saw the article, the gas down, like where you are in the AI adoption, but they're going through that stage from like just a prompt to like a workflow to work trees to really agentic flows. But at the size of a company like Wise, especially like you're regulated, it's very impressive to see that kind of like empowerment and that kind of pace. And just to go back to your point, because you mentioned the one that you did before December and in February, and I think I'm not sure. This is just speculation, but I think that Christmas break, those 3 weeks of like thing, and with Claude and Cursor gave you like double tokens and everything. I feel like people also for the first time like could stop from like the running into their job and sit down and really have a true like kind of play with like AI tools. And I saw it. You're not the first one who tells me that people came into this new year with with a vengeance. They're like, okay, now we're ready. But I think the event that you did that gave them really permission, that set kind of the tone, like here's what we can do at Wise and here's what you can now go and explore because we want to bring it in. Really, I think that also helped, like to unlock, just open the floodgates, I think.
I'm sure the individual engineers did touch it, but the ones that came back vocal about it after Christmas were our most senior engineers and our most senior leads. Yeah. So some of our most senior leads used to be the game-changing ICs at Wise. They like bring Kubernetes to the company and this kind of thing. So in their hearts, they're still hardcore engineers. They just happen to be like heads of department now. They're the ones that came back and were like, holy crap, like this has changed. This is game changing now. And that like culture really does come like from the top and sets a tone. It's so hard if you've got 8,000 people to drive a culture from the bottom, but it is quite easy to be like, if you're really senior and people respect you, to be like, I tried this, wow, and that trickled down.
And we're still figuring all this out, right? Like I was speaking to one of the heads of engineering at Nike, and he was like, it has shifted from being leading from the back to leading from the front now, because like if you're in the trenches with your team and you can actually talk to them about, I've used Claude to do this, I've created different trees, right? Like I'm running a Mac Mini, I'm using OpenClaw, right? And you're removing that stigma almost of like, this is not built for sophisticated engineers when it actually absolutely is. But at the same time, from a leader's perspective, you need to be in the trenches with them because we're still figuring this out, right? This is still kind of new, right, in the grand scheme of things, right? Which is really powerful that you're saying that, but also other companies are seeing that as well. It's like when the shift of these senior engineers, the leaders, are actually driving the charge, then they see more activity with the rest of the team because they have more confidence, and it kind of removes that stigma of it's actually okay to use AI to generate code.
Mhm. And you can see it in the PRs, as you said, the guy who came, who was managing,
Yeah.
wasn't pushing code, and now you can see for real in your PRs that this guy is not pushing code, and the code is good quality, and he looks in and he tells you like, yes, this was Claude, and so you don't have that. You don't have that excuse anymore. Be like, yeah, no, but you don't understand. This is not ready for prime time.
A really interesting one, this is like a change that AI has made, is I had been, like traditionally, I'd been hands-off leadership for years now. And like I had been kind of arguing because we were making leads do pair programming still. And I had been kind of on the picket lines to be like, this is unnecessary for the role. Like, there's not the things you should be testing to get people through the door here. I'm now one of the biggest PR contributors. So it's like the head of, not the head of all of recruitment, but certainly the head of my division recruitment was messaging me today going, we need to look at the stats. Maybe we need to rethink again. Like it's a crazy shift. What do we want from an engineering leader now? I can't answer that right on this stream, but it's definitely interesting like conversation.
Yeah, even for us, right? If we were to hire a head of engineering, no, the traditional playbook is kind of scrapped, right? You're like, okay, it's more about, okay, what projects have you built with AI, right? What internal tools have you built in your last company? You know, how are you going to actually help your team move faster with AI? And yeah, the playbook hasn't been written for that yet, which is kind of cool in a way.
Yeah.
If I was going to question senior individuals, I'm talking very senior or leads, I guess my big question is, you know, what's the biggest problem you've fixed with AI? Rather than, I think it's in one trap that's easy to fall into, and I've been there, is like, it's very easy for a lead to vibe out a greenfield project and expect an engineer working on a legacy code base to be as productive as you were. And it's quite easy to have like thoughts in that line. So I think that's why I think it's really key problem of like, so you've been given these powers, like what is the biggest problem you've solved like with them?
Yeah, that's a really good point, because even if you look at the in general, you know, like, you're submitting PRs, but like, what are those? As you say, greenfield, internal tooling, all of that, that's like not a consequential thing, let's say. And then, but if you see them that they, you know, went back to the legacy code, fixed, or like, you know, enhanced things like from that, I think it's it gives them a good perspective. It also gives them the true like kind of sense of where the AI is, and maybe what's missing internally to make your legacy code base kind of AI friendly. And I had one question, maybe like for because I know like we're speaking to a lot of companies, they're all on a different kind of journey in here, like maturity level. So you mentioned like these guys who came back and were power users. Like, is there anything that you would maybe like tell others how to spot these guys earlier? Like what like predispositions make, so like because you know, like as you say, like the power now is to really get people who are respected, to like get them in a position to like use, you know, like spread the gospel, let's say, within at least their pods, their teams and stuff like that, right? But how do you spot those guys? How do you not wait until, you know, they get around to it or something? How do you spot them and incentivize them, I guess?
So the key one is you have to work out where you are as a company on your AI like adoption journey, because that makes a huge difference. Like, where I feel like Wise is quite mature on our journey now, but I also feel I could be naive. Something new might happen and be naive. But so at the very start, the easiest way is output tokens, because output tokens are generally code generated, whereas input tokens are easy to burn through analysis. You could just point at a repo and say, go read every line, and input tokens would go through the roof. Whereas output tokens are more like code generation. So you want to go find the users with the highest output tokens. Now, of course, that's at the start of your journey, because right now, if I just look at output tokens, I'll have people come attack my metrics saying, how do you know it's any good? How do you know the code's any good? So after output tokens, so that's where you can start. Then you want to, if you mature past that, you want to start looking more along the lines of efficiency. So starting thinking like, who's using a lot of tokens, but who's swapping models a lot? Like, and then who's using different tools and why? So what we found at first is our power users, as we called them, they were our top, at the very start, 5% of users. And still today, the top 10% have such a dramatic spike in usage compared to the rest of the 90% of other users. You start noticing patterns. The people that were using it the most then evolved to be using more than one tool. They were the first ones writing skills, like, and then we do a lot of user interviewing in my team to sit down one-to-one to really kind of understand usage. And so people would be saying things like, oh, well, I plan with Claude, but I execute in Codex. And so you'd ask why, and they'd be like, well, Claude is best at planning, but Codex is best at one-shot execution. It's a tighter sandbox model, so it means it will get in less trouble. And we started, so it's keep it fun. Right now, I could not tell you, our definition of a power user is 100% going to be out of date. Like, but these are the things you start to spot. It's multi-tool, multi-model is an easy one. If you can find out highest output tokens, but changing between Opus, Haiku, Sonnet, like they're showing you they're using their engineering brain to pick complexity to the best suited model. Now, if anyone through Anthropic or anyone's listening, of course, there are lots of benchmarks saying that Opus uses less tokens because it's better at reasoning. There's different situations. If you're good enough to understand this is a haiku task, you're the kind of person I want to talk to.
And yeah, that's really interesting, Rick. Right? And like as developer experience, right? You have to uplift probably everybody in the organization, right? So like these power users, right? You've got 10% of your engineering team that are power users, and I guess the more time you invest in them, they'll become even more power users, right? Like, what about the rest of the 90%, right? Like, what trends are you seeing that's preventing them from being power users or using AI more?
It's a few different ones. I guess the thing that I'm most interested in as a human being is psychological safety.
Right.
Like it's that constant fear that am I using a tool that will take my job? Like this is a real barrier. A lot of that was initially a 2025 mindset. In 2026, it's much more of a I don't want to be left behind like mindset that I speak to people. A lot of people that were I don't want to lose my job people were also skeptics. They've now seen how great these models are. They've seen how much, like if you wanted to build something from scratch in an AI first way using agents only, would you hire an engineer or just some random person off the street? You'd hire an engineer still, and that's for a reason. So they're starting to learn that a lot more. The other one is code creation has now been a practice known thing we can do with AI. But I work in a tribe called Platform. We're supporting things for the org. So we are bucketed very much in like infrastructure teams, service teams, and pillar teams. So I have pillar and service in my domain, but some people are just looking at databases, and some of our most critical databases in the company, fear factor at high, and there's less evidence of success for them to copy. Same for our networking teams and things like that. So they don't have the same communities built out. Whereas if you work in prod dev for Wise, you're nearly all Java engineers. Your key skill is understanding domain. That's not an AI's expertise, but you have got a whole community of people going, install this skill, install superpowers, point it at Jira with the Atlassian MCP and say fix. Like, so they've got so much evidence. And so we've seen our platform adoption, I haven't checked in the last few weeks, was at around 50% of engineers, whereas the rest of the org was closer to 85, 90.
Right.
So they are in platform, they've been really struggling to see the benefits, or not. Don't think you see the benefits. I think it's struggling to understand the impact it can have on their role in the best places, like, and having enough community to share success stories.
They probably don't have the, as you said, like the opportunities to use it as frequent as a developer building an app, right? Which is a lot of prototyping, a lot of trial and error and stuff like that. You know, a lot of prod devs are working with production, right? So there's probably a finite things that they can go and actually even code, right? If they wanted to. So yeah.
But there's so much they can do that means they can then focus on more.
Yeah.
You know, why we pay the big bucks for their super engineering brains. So, for instance, if they were about to spend a whole Friday grooming the backlog, in my team, like, we would groom the backlog with Codex or Claude. We'd use the Atlassian MCP.
Yeah.
We'd give it a refined prompt. We'd go test it a little to make sure we're not about to nuke the every ticket we've got. And that's now not a human job. And that means the engineers can now use their brains to try and tackle fantastic or really complex problems. And so some people just need to be shown that. And so rather than getting code output gains from AI, they can gain space from AI. More space to think and solve problems. Like, Wise is growing and growing and growing. The way we set things up in the tens to serve customers, we probably dreamt of transferring 1 billion. That's the reality now. Are we ready to transfer 1 trillion? Like, because that's going to be the next thing, you know. And we can now give people space instead of doing the keep the lights on work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think your some of the things that you're doing with these agent-only days, I think probably those guys need that focus time. And I guess at some point you're going to have maybe hopefully cross-pollination across your engineering teams, where some of the team that are leading the pack can, you know, be almost like a case study. It's not like a one-to-one case study, but at least like conceptually they can maybe pass on some learnings and get, you know, the networking guys excited about these things. And but it's very fascinating. And I guess an interesting point was that, like, we spoke a lot about, like, you know, power users and like people, you know, like senior. So are you seeing the landscape shift for like more junior people, like when they come in, like I mean, from not only a technical perspective, but like an attitude perspective, like, you know, what would you recommend today somebody just coming into Wise as a, maybe like with a few years of experience, like 2-3 years, you know, junior engineer?
I guess if we started with the more what am I seeing kind of attitude part. So we have an award-nominated early careers program that is my baby, which I love. Wise takes 50 graduates every year. In September, they start as a large cohort, but so that's not the 2 to 3 years like you're saying, but the fresh out of university in most cases. No, nothing. What you see there is quite interesting. You see, at least with the September cohort 2025, so this is a really interesting time for AI and building with AI. We still took them through the boot camp, hands-on manual. Like, they had Copilot installed from starting Wise, but we're talking Copilot in a very tab completion sense. Next September 26 cohort is going to look very different. Like, what am I seeing? I was seeing a real hesitance to use AI. So just, this is to quote people, would be, how am I going to learn anything if I just use AI? Was the kind of attitude. And I had a whole slide deck that used to go through, you know, this is how we used to learn, and it was very master and apprentice. You know, then we invented schools to try and scale it. Then, I don't know how old you gentlemen are, but I'm old enough for Encarta by Microsoft. So then I talked about Encarta, and then I talked about Google, and just, you know, and we've always advanced our way of scaling learning. this is just the next one. Like when Encarta came out, people weren't saying, oh, am I going to learn anything? When Google came out, people said, am I going to learn? They didn't ask this, just because we've invented a thinking machine. If you want to learn, you will learn. You ask exploratory questions of the AI and it gives you answers. And that's nothing to do. We've just created easier aggregation. You no longer have to scroll Stack Overflow to try and find something that matches. And so that's one of the things. I think the main thing with the people just coming in now is the granularity for me of should you use a reduce or a flat map or any of these things is not irrelevant, but less important. Now it's much more of, I think, master and apprentice, even though that's where I said we first started, has never been more important. Learning how seniors actually think and feel and make decisions is so much more important now than the granularity of the functions. From like GPT 5.3, Opus 4.6, they are so incredibly good at writing code. The more important thing is, can you tell it how great code should be structured? Like, why is it not, we're, as you pointed out, so regulated? There are very strict change management controls. It's still very humans reading every line. So we still need code structured in a way that is really easy for humans to digest, which also makes it easier for AI to digest as a great side effect. So for me, as of today, I do still think, of course, juniors should be putting a lot of effort into learning the native APIs of Stacks, but I think we are moving further away from that. And where we used to see system design as like a more senior subject, system design is becoming more of a junior subject, because if you can articulate a whole system in a prompt and a Claude plan, it will be good to know whether you should use a NoSQL database, a Postgres database. Is this should be event distributed? It's all the moving to these kind of things. We're just in a weird hybrid place yet where I don't have all the answers. I'll be planning my next experiments for September when the new cohort come. Certainly, it'll be very AI heavy.
And that's really fascinating, right? Because it's like, part of my mind is going, well, do we lose, are these engineers losing the skill of introspection, right? To learn by doing, the failure modes, right? And the hard failure modes that a lot of these senior engineers have kind of etched into their DNA now of being an engineer, right? Versus like this, yes, we're giving them a safety net called Claude or Cursor where they can just go run it, test it, fail, but they don't feel the pain of taking down a system or whatever, right? And then the first time they do that, everyone points to, well, you're using AI, So it's, I don't really have a question behind that. It's just more of a what I'm hearing and I'm thinking to talk at the moment. But like the introspection, I think is very important.
But I think, regardless of AI, that has always been a problem in big tech. Because there's so many guardrails, so many gates, so many protective things that I've used analogies in the past that, like in the early noughties and things, senior engineers were these rugged, battle-hardened people that have dropped a production database and they're bringing it back at 3 a.m. To do that in WISE is so near impossible now. And if it is, our RTO and RPO and everything is so fast, we can bring things up so quickly. So I think that was already a problem. Now, in a startup, completely different. If you're going Wild West, you got production database keys on your local machine, anything can still happen there. But also in startups, there are people that are hiring juniors less. I think that, yes, I agree, we are losing that, but I think we were losing it anyway without AI. I think where it's shifted now is learning through pipeline failure. Why has the pipeline gone down?
Yeah.
What does that big block of unformatted text mean? Learning through logs. Like this
Yeah,
is, I
yeah,
think, the where it shifted.
yeah.
But it's very interesting that I totally agree about like the now, and I've spoken to a few friends at like even big tech companies like Meta and things. It's like the syntax is not important anymore. Like Rust, C++, like that's not where your talent is. So like even if you were like this crazy C++ guy who knew about everything about C++, that's kind of like not not the point today. But like the point is the basically the mental models the engineering mental models you build to make decisions about how systems look, you thinking about different edge cases, you trying to like really understand the problem space and the different things, and then communicating that to the AI to get the syntax written basically. But those mental models become much more important. That's why like I think and I think why, because that's why senior people have the most leverage with AI currently. It's because they can articulate, they know where to look, they know where the guardrails, and whenever they see the result, they can quickly judge of like yes or no. Does this look good or not? And I think the quicker you develop that, and I guess the better, the better off you're going to be, even if you're a junior, if you kind of like seek that to develop that side of engineering as early on, rather than focusing on, like as you say, the small details that now are kind of taken
The
care of by.
opposite, the opposite is kind of true as well, right? Like these models can like develop sycophantic behaviors, right? Where like you have a junior that's armed to the teeth with AI, and they're so confident in what they're saying. It's like, very strong conviction, loosely held, and all that as well, right? So I think it's trying to figure out what's the real truth in all this as well.
Yeah, we'll need to find a balance. I think everyone,
Yeah.
like everyone, that's why these conversations are very interesting, is because none of us has a, like 100% blueprint.
Yeah.
We are all experimenting. We're trying stuff. Things might work in 6 months. Things might completely change because they were built on assumptions that are no longer hold. So I think that's the exciting part about this, and we're all looking for, like this equilibrium state for now. And I think that's why I think you should, like, that's why you mentioned the cultural part and the attitude part. That's the important, because the only true constant today is experimentation. Like everyone needs to just get on that experimentation train and iterate, and then spread the knowledge very quickly to your org, and then
I think sorry.
Oh no, go ahead. Go ahead, Rick.
I think with your I agree with you around the language and the syntax. I feel where technical expertise still is key to have is around performance. Like around, because there are such niche things when it comes to a technical stack and its performance and things that are still very human orientated. And I think whether it's engineering or another subject, like we've all chat GPT'd some household electrics or something, or chat GPT, I've got this rash. Like, when has the entry level almost been replaced? But I mean entry level like in career, I mean entry level knowledge like is not needed. And when do you still want to speak to the consultant? And I think if you're running, say, a Java stack, or especially the amount of Kafka messages Wise is sending, is where you are still looking for that consultant that understands system performance. I'm not saying they wouldn't use AI to go back and forth and play out an idea, but you kind of still want that in a human at the moment. And I think that still is very key. Like, I do think that if I was now looking in the lower levels of like individual contributor, I wouldn't really care if they had never done Java or Python. I think that is irrelevant. I think, as you said, I think attitude weighs everything here now. Is how do you think, how do you explore, how do you prioritize? And I think everyone's having to build muscles of leadership now, because what leaders were doing is how we now orchestrate AI agents to behave.
So tell me, when does Christo become an app developer at Wise?
So Christo is I don't know the last time he pushed a PR, but it wasn't that long ago. He was still trying to contribute. Like, he was the original of what we used to call web app.
Yeah. One thing that we're seeing, right, not just like startups, but in bigger organizations, right? We were in Amsterdam yesterday talking to a big grocery giant there, and like they want their engineers to use AI, but they also want their data analysts to use AI and make changes, right? And the head of engineering was like, okay, I trust my engineers to make more deliberate and conscious decisions, but my data scientists and all them who, don't have a grounding in software engineering, but we're still expecting to ship. Like, how do we handle that risk? And are you seeing that at Wise, where people outside of engineering are wanting to ship, and is that introducing more GRC risk or GRC problems or QA problems that your engineers have to come and save the day?
We're not seeing more problems yet, but we have got that very scenario. I guess the analysts that were already kind of functioning like engineers, we have a role called analyst engineers. They were some of our earliest, biggest users. Because when we talk about like the psychological safety side, they weren't thinking like engineers. They were thinking, wow, I've been given this power to write SQL in a way I never could before. And so they were the biggest ones. They were the first ones looking at MCPs to help them. But we also have a lot of analysts that were more traditional analysts, and we do have a lot of data scientists. They're the hardest ones to kind of justify like the safety or not using it, because they're kind of almost a hybrid. They're engineering and techie, but in the middle. But we've all seen what's just happened with Axios and FFmpeg and and stuff. And would they be able to differentiate? And no. The hardest thing I think for me is, regardless, like, we've dropped the word engineer from our little company, well, not company, like intra squad mission now, because we've started helping more people, is I think there is such incredible innovation gains by letting the product roll loose with these tools. I think the things they've been dreaming to demo, the POCs they've not been able to do, but it is also worrying. Like, it's how can we create a playground for them? Do we get a Lovable or a Bolt.new, or do we build something which they can use? And currently we are, like everyone, playing catch up and guessing. We're writing security policies. We are putting gates in over MCP allow lists. I've wrote AI skills progressions. I've wrote AI expectation guides. You can imagine the kind of things: you are the pilot, not the passenger. You must review the code. We use Absorb currently as like our learning tool. So we wrote a whole lesson on agentic dev in there. All of these still are much more guardrails than gates. We are slowly building controls and putting controls in just to be safe. Like, I think the biggest thing that really brings it home is like what someone said to me when I started working in fintech and regulated companies, and like they was like, imagine your grandma's savings are in this company. Now, how would you like it to go wrong? And you soon go, well, I actually wouldn't like it to go wrong for my grandma. That's her life savings, like that's her pension. So and so we have to be careful with the customer's money, and we have to do all the right by that, the regulations and compliance. So we try not to block. As I said, this is an empowering company. We've got a mission, we are going for it, but we are just trying to be safe at the time. So right now, like a non-engineer can't push to production. Like, these are rules we have, but they can use the tools.
Okay. Yeah. So starting point. Yeah.
I try to push them more into using like Codex, because it's got a tighter sandbox. A model than Claude Code has, but Claude Code is definitely the buzzword at Wise. That's where most of our users are.
What do you think the future of CI/CD will be, right? Because we talk to a lot of people, right? And like feedback loops are becoming as important as code generation now, right? But some CI just runs that far too slow because it's testing a lot of different things, right? Like, do you see the future of that shifting, or do you actually see shift left actually taking off? Because we've talked about shift left for years, right? And we've retorted to like using slow tools like scanning and all that to take an overnight run or whatever. Like, where do you see the future of that?
I see the future becoming more and more hands-off for the standard product engineer. Like, we were already doing really smart things before AI, which you can just see an AI getting involved in. So all of our tier 1 and 2 services have to use automated canary analysis. Now, that was all black and white rather than an AI making calls, but you could just see AI canary analysis, where there's a much more of a logical thinking system behind the deployment. So as we steadily roll out testing against more and more traffic, and AI is now reading the metrics and making decisions where a human might have been watching that. And so you could already see that. We're already looking at agents running in CI. We're already looking at agents auto fixing builds. So, because that's a nice bottleneck for engineers. The current pattern for an engineer at Wise is, they would copy and paste the failure build, and they would paste it into their agent and say, look, this is failing. What do you think? So, let's take that away. And so it's just slowly moving to more of a hands-off kind of system. And I think we will just be able to do much more smarter, when you're looking at red metrics, and go so much deeper and understanding, is the system working? And that's the kind of, like, if we want to have early careers people having massive impact, that's the kind of things that will allow that.
Interesting.
And are the people, the dev, let's say, because like especially like the SREs, the AppSec people, historically they're always been like outnumbered by devs, right? And they're like, oh, devs shipping too fast, like we cannot keep up. And now you just gave the devs a tool to now like ship even faster. So like, do you see the are the SRE, AppSec, DevOps, like basically everyone kind of upstream are they adapting to this? Are they also leveraging these tools, or like, do you?
Yes, but more because everyone, I guess, senior leadership always want a magic wand from platform engineering. So it's, if I can auto fix builds, why can't I auto fix an incident? And so we are currently looking at ways that we can, can we expose more incident data? Are there lessons learned there that agents can pick up on? So the engineering mass at Wise wants an MCP basically for everything. Because they want to be able to make better decisions. We always, before AI, we always had the same issues everyone had, like mean time to recovery. How do we recover quickly? How do we solve cross-team communication and review? Like, we always had those same problems a lot of companies solve for. So people are now always hoping AI can solve that. Can we make it so documentation is never out of date with AI? If we see a code change in a PR in CI, we trigger a CI agent that writes the docs, commits them for you. Like, these are the kind of places that I don't know if they will be 2026, 2027, or when we've got enough capacity and AI is giving us capacity, to start thinking, how do we really work on our fleet management at Wise?
Cool. Last question. So what do you think the signal is, right, when we look at AI, right, and your experience today, right? Is there a signal that people will say it hasn't propagated to the mainstream yet, right? We haven't seen it on X or whatever, right? Is there an underlying signal that you think that the mainstream is missing, that you're seeing at Wise, that could be transferable to other companies? And it could be anything related to AI.
Transfer, it's specifically in engineering, because I guess that's where most of my function is. I don't know if it's a translatable skill, but what we really have seen is hype to burnout, to finding what your lovely consistent rhythm is. Like we've now finally got a predictable forecast for like output tokens and token usage. Whereas you can imagine when we're talking to our CTO, trying to predict him the AI budget, like how those repetitive meetings were going with, well, we got it wrong. No, we got it wrong again. Like we're now seeing, and what we saw with engineers, and I don't know how companies could learn that, but I think you don't need to go as crazy as we did at the very start. Like, I think you can, like, you're not, as long as you are investing, you're not going to be left behind. It's not like, it's not, you don't have to go rocket speed. And I think we didn't go too fast and break things. Our change fail rate is actually going down. Now, the hypothesis is that AI problems will show themselves later because AI is good at making working code. So we don't know yet. But currently, everybody's using Claude, Codex, Windsurf, and we're getting more stable. So that's a wonderful thing. And we'll monitor that over time. But I think we went too excited and we went too big, and we could have done it in a slightly more sustainable fashion. I know what it was like myself. I was addicted. I was like, I was like one of those Anthropic stories. Like, people would read about them using 4 terminals and they'll think that's crazy. No human's doing that. And I'm like, give me 6. Give me 6. There must be another problem I can solve. And then I started to realize that I was basically like, I'd end the day like I'd run 10K.
Yeah.
like mentally. And I think we've now learned that a lot as engineering at Wise. And so it'd just be more like, rather than a missing signal, it's more like you shouldn't not be investing. Like, that is silly. But don't the PR numbers do not change overnight. There's so much of a learning curve that if you fork out a £200 Claude Max license for all your engineers and expect your PRs per engineer per week to jump to 10 for 4, that's not going to happen. There's so much to work out about ways of working now. If you can do a week's worth of work in a day, like, you've got a week's worth of work to review. That's a new skill to learn. So I'd say, don't force your engineers to rush. Expect there's an upfront cost, and it will slowly tick up, because our PRs per engineer now are slowly going up.
Gotcha. Awesome. Rick, lovely to have you on. There's a lot of great nuggets there for people who've listened. So thanks, man.
No, thank you for having me. It's been great.
Thank you, Rick.